You didn't save your soulmate by performing some cinematic rescue that everyone would recognize. The real false belief is that saving has to look dramatic to count, that if no one clapped and no ambulance lights flashed, nothing spiritual happened. But most turning points don't announce themselves. They pass through the world disguised as a quick decision, a small restraint, a moment of decency you didn't even label as important. If you've been waiting for proof that your life carries meaning beyond what you can measure, it may be because you're assuming meaning only lives in the loud events. The truth is harsher and kinder at once. The life-changing moments are often the ones you barely remember because you weren't trying to be heroic. You were just being yourself, and that self, your standards, your compassion, your timing, altered the direction of someone else's story. That alteration is what people later call fate, because it's easier than admitting how much power ordinary choices actually have. Here's the second false belief, that if you didn't know they were your person at the time, your actions couldn't have mattered in a destined way, as if the universe requires you to sign a form before it takes your behavior seriously. Most of the time, you don't recognize the purpose of an encounter while you're inside it. You recognize it later when the pattern becomes visible. You hold the door for someone and forget it. You step between a friend and a bad decision and think you're just being annoying. You recommend a therapist, a job, a neighborhood cafe, and it feels like casual conversation. Yet, those tiny moments can become load-bearing beams in someone's life. If you saved them, it may have looked like not exploiting them when you could have, not humiliating them when you were angry, not abandoning them when it would have been easy. It may have looked like being the first person in a long time who didn't take from them. That kind of saving doesn't leave a headline, it leaves a person still standing. What makes this so hard to accept is the appearance versus reality split. On the surface, your life might look like nothing is moving. The texts aren't coming, the dating scene feels like a loop, the prayers feel unanswered, and the idea of a soulmate sounds like a story told to keep people hopeful. Meanwhile, reality can be moving underneath in ways you can't track because the most important changes happen in private. Someone is healing from a relationship that wrecked their trust. Someone is learning to sleep again after months of anxiety. Someone is rebuilding their finances, their self-respect, their body, their faith. If that person is tied to you, their preparation won't be visible on your screen, and your preparation won't be visible to them either. So the appearance is stagnation, and the reality is convergence. Two timelines adjusting so they can meet without destroying each other. You might even misread the signs because the movement doesn't feel romantic. It can feel like interruption, losing a connection that wasn't good for you, getting rejected from something you wanted, being forced to slow down, being pushed into a new routine. On the surface, it looks like life is taking away your options. Underneath, it may be removing the versions of you that would have fumbled what you're asking for. People talk about God's timing, like it's a soft blanket. Sometimes it's a blade. Timing can mean you don't get what you want when you want it, because you would have handled it selfishly or fearfully or carelessly. And timing can mean they aren't handed to you until they're safe to receive you. The appearance is delay, the reality is protection. You think you're being ignored, but you may be being guided away from the outcomes that would have made you cynical. The inner dynamic that drives this is psychological before it is mystical. When you do something that keeps another person intact, when you don't exploit their vulnerability, when you offer help without demanding ownership, you create a kind of imprint. You become a reference point in their nervous system, evidence that safety exists, and safety is magnetic. People don't just fall in love with beauty or charm. They fall in love with the feeling that their body can finally unclench. At the same time, your own inner dynamic changes. When you choose integrity in a moment where you could have chosen ego, you make yourself more trustworthy to your future. You become someone who keeps your standards even when no one is watching. That self-trust is not a mood. It's an earned permission to want something good without feeling like a fraud. If you keep asking why you feel strangely calm about meeting the one, even when circumstances look messy, it might be because some part of you knows you've already acted like the kind of person who can hold that love without breaking it. There's another layer people don't mention. Saving someone sometimes means you spared them from you. You didn't push when you wanted to. You didn't insist on being understood when you were wounded. You didn't pursue them at the wrong time. when your desire was mixed with loneliness and entitlement. You let a conversation end without forcing it into something. You walked away from a situation where you could have left damage behind. From the outside, that can look like missed opportunity. From the inside, it can be restraint. And restraint is often what keeps the future clean. This is where many spiritual stories get distorted, because people confuse destiny with possession. If God is bringing someone to you, it isn't to satisfy an obsession. It's to create a connection that doesn't require manipulation. Sometimes the sign you're looking for is simply that you didn't destroy what you touched. That's rare. That's holy in a quiet way. Picture a small case, not a legend, a late-night corner store, fluorescent lights, buzzing, winter air pressing at the door whenever it opens. You're buying something forgettable. Water, gum, did say batteries. And you notice the cashier's hands shaking as they count change. The line behind you is impatient. You could roll your eyes and make a joke. Everyone would laugh. Instead, you slow your voice. You say, "Take your time." The person behind you sighs. The cashier's shoulders drop a fraction, like their body had been bracing for impact. You leave, and you never think about it again. But imagine that cashier goes home to a life where every mistake is punished, where they've been told that they're stupid so often it feels factual. That one interaction doesn't fix their life, but it interrupts the script for 5 seconds. It gives them a different data point. Not everyone is waiting to crush you. That interruption might be what stops them from quitting that job that week, which might be what keeps them in the city long enough to meet someone who changes everything. Saving doesn't always mean lifting someone out of the water. Sometimes it means not being the one who pushes their head under. Now for the counterexample, because not every helpful act is saving, and not every delay is destiny. There are people who confuse rescue with control. They give money so they can dictate. They offer comfort so they can demand closeness. They preach, "God told me you're mine," as a way to override consent. That isn't spiritual, it's strategy. And it doesn't lead to a soulmate. It leads to a hostage situation with religious vocabulary. If you've ever been tempted to force a connection because you're afraid of losing it, that's the wrong path wearing the right costume. The true saving is clean. It doesn't require repayment. It doesn't require immediate recognition. It doesn't grow into entitlement. If your story includes heartbreak and long silence, it may be because you're being trained out of that counterfeit version of love. Real alignment doesn't need you to chase someone down. It doesn't need you to prove you're chosen by cornering another human being. Here's the nuance that makes the whole thing real instead of fantasy. God bringing someone to you doesn't necessarily mean a sudden miraculous arrival with perfect certainty. It can look like a series of ordinary openings you actually have to walk through. A friend invites you to a small dinner you almost decline. You take a different route home because traffic is bad. You accept a job you weren't excited about, and it puts you in a room with a person who feels strangely familiar even though you've never met. Or you meet them once, briefly, and the connection doesn't ignite because one of you is still raw, still defensive, still learning. Months later, you cross paths again, and the temperature is different because you're different. The bringing is not always a delivery. Sometimes it's a positioning. The spiritual part is the timing, and the human part is your willingness to show up as someone who can recognize what's in front of you without trying to own it yet. The paradoxical ending is this. If you truly saved your soulmate without knowing, the proof won't be that they arrive and immediately complete you. The proof will be that when they do arrive, you won't need to chase, perform, or bargain. You'll feel the strange steadiness of something that doesn't have to be forced. And you'll notice something else that's almost unsettling. You'll realize you weren't being prepared to receive them as a reward. You were being prepared to meet them as an equal. The chosen one story people crave is often a way to avoid responsibility, to turn love into a prophecy so they don't have to do the work of becoming safe. But the quieter truth is sharper. The reason the right person can come now is because you've already proven in small hidden ways that you won't ruin what you touch. That kind of proof doesn't feel glamorous. It feels like a life that finally makes sense, not because it's easy, but because it's clean.